The Delta variant spreading across the country, causing chaos and taking lives as thousands are dying on a daily basis as a result of all of the negligence, not only from this government that's in power now, but especially because of what was set in precedent by the Trump administration. But what we're going to see is how every possible group that can be blamed for the carnage is about to be targeted. We're seeing that now. But first, we're on the clock with Georgia Ford.
In the last 2 weeks, more than 500,000 new cases across America. And when you look globally, America continues to lead the international stage on new COVID cases. And so, again, as we are trying to narrow down exactly how to get this pandemic under control, the accountability is being passed around between government officials and different communities. What we'd like to start off with this morning is Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick. You'll never guess who he has decided to hold accountable for this entire situation.
Are coming after your state really quickly here, and as a response, coming after your state because the increased COVID numbers, hospitalizations, deaths are up in Texas, and there's a direct assault on your governor's policies and your state's policies. Very brief response.
Yeah. Well, Laura, the COVID is spreading, particularly most of the numbers are with the unvaccinated, and the Democrats like to blame Republicans on that. Well, the biggest group in most states are African Americans who have not been vaccinated. The last time I checked, over 90% of them vote for Democrats in their major cities and major counties. So it's up to the Democrats to get, just as it's up to Republicans, to try to get as many people vaccinated. But we respect the fact that if people don't want the vaccination, we're not going to force it on them. That's their individual right. But in terms of criticizing the Republicans for this, we're encouraging people who want to take it, but they're doing nothing for the African American community that has a significant high number of unvaccinated
TikTok
people.
videos.
So they need
we got
to address that.
We got a lot of TikTok.
Yes.
All right. So I'd like to get your opinion, Ben and Brother Mac, on this. Here we're seeing now the shift blaming not from the Democratic Party to the Republican Party, but from the Republican Party to the Black community.
Ben, go ahead. I need to gather my thoughts.
You know, I was trying to yield to you, Brother Mac, for the same exact reason, but I'll jump into it. I honestly believe that these people believe that death is not permanent or that it's a game. Because as much as he's trying to weave a narrative that's going to shift the blame from Republicans to Democrats by virtue of the fact that the African-American community does have lower vaccination rates than we should have, right? We have to address that issue. But at the core of what this lieutenant governor is doing is playing a game of hot potato with the lives of millions of people. Because at the end, what did he say? He said, it's not though we're not going to force a vaccine mandate because that's your individual right. Well, let's get beyond that game right now of trying to draw an equivalence and trying to play both sides. Actually, this is a both sidisms that he's trying to play here. The reality of it is that unless we do something significant and drastic at this point, we could very well see 1 million Americans dead from this pandemic. And it is expressly because of the idiocy of this people like this lieutenant governor.
Well, you know, Ben, let me add to that. Texas has a population 29.7 million people. Again, men lie, women lie, numbers don't lie. They got a population of around 29.7 million. White folks make up 73+% of that. Black folks make up just a little over 12% of that. And of their new COVID cases, 17,000. So again, and keep in mind, you want to blame black folks, the governor of the state, Governor Abbott, just tested positive Saturday. So what? Governor Abbott was at a house party with brothers and sisters. Is that what it is trying to say? So again, as you were stating, when you go back to the way that the Republicans under -45 have handled COVID from the onset, they've been anti-mask, they've been anti-vaccination, they've been anti-everything. And now that this new variant has come along and this new rise has come up, now you want to take You want to do what America is absolutely an expert at. Let's blame black folks.
And not just blame Black folks, but make things about race, which I feel like we're the ones who are always accused of doing that. And here you see the lieutenant governor do just that. He blames the Black community. And really, I appreciate the statistics, Brother Mac, and to expound on that, when you look at how many Black congressional leaders do we have? How many Black governors do we have? How many Black mayors do we have? How many Black people are really in the seat to make decisions that are going to impact not only the country, but the states and the cities who are impacted by this issue? And so while it remains an individual right, it is predominantly white leaders who are in positions who are refusing to make mask mandates, who in some cases, like in Florida, we're seeing a ban on mask mandates. We're seeing predominantly white leaders who are refusing to mandate the vaccine. We're seeing predominantly white leaders who are saying our kids should go back to school, despite the fact that we've seen at least 95,000 children get it within a 1 week period. And so how factually can you blame the Black community when at large it is white political leaders leading on this issue?
So Georgia, let's look at this from a data standpoint. Okay. Texas, Republican. Louisiana is a Republican state. Mississippi, Florida, Alabama, all Republican states. All states with some of the highest COVID numbers. Now, if you want to look at trends, and then what is it that the Republicans have said? As we stated, they've been anti-everything around COVID, almost anti-belief in the fact that it even exists. So these states have been the ones under Republican leadership who have not wanted to follow mask mandates, who have not encouraged people to get vaccinations. And now in your time of crisis, when everybody knew when you were standing in that tunnel, that wasn't a light at the end of the tunnel, that was a freight train bearing down on you. And now you want to say that it is us, the engineers, we're the Black folks driving the train straight at you. No, fam, you were the one that put that locomotive on its course and then went down that tunnel with only one way out, and that is to get run flat over by COVID. And now Black folk are the blame for that. Look at all these states that we just mentioned. Under what guise, what leadership are they under? All Republican-led states.
That's right. That's right. And I just to put a fine point to this entire conversation, the radio host Phil Valentine, 59-year-old conservative radio talk show host, made a mockery of the pandemic in general, of the vaccine, of the mask mandates. Then he contracted COVID-19 and he dismissed it. And he was like, it's nothing. The radio station that it was his home station announced this weekend that he died of COVID-19. I'm like, folks, there ain't no coming back from death. I would think that people will understand the permanency of death, but they are so committed to their politics that they would not only sacrifice their own lives, but we see now that they're willing to sacrifice the lives of their children.
And I feel like for this lieutenant governor, the Black community is just an easy scapegoat. Because let's be real, there has been hesitancy in the Black community around this vaccine. But as a nation, what are we doing to address that hesitancy? I've seen Black women in my community who have been leading the charge on trying to tackle the misinformation, tackle the hesitancy straight on. And what is it rooted in? When you get out here in the Black community and you really talk to people in the community and ask them why are they hesitating to take the vaccine, a lot of it stems from historical trauma in the medical industry. When you look at what happened to Henrietta Lacks, when you look at what happened in Tuskegee, there are a lot of examples that you can point to historically within the medical industry where Black people were either manipulated, were not given access to medicine that was available to cure their disease, or were just flat out given the wrong medication. There's so many examples historically where the medical industry has caused harm in the Black community. And so you have some people who have remained hesitant, but when you look at the numbers, it doesn't equate to the reason why we're in this situation. And so this accusation is a reach, and it's false. And in my opinion, I feel like it's just an easy scapegoat for this lieutenant governor to continue to pass the buck to somebody else. You're tired of passing the buck to Democrats. You don't want to take responsibility in the Republican Party. So, hey, let's just blame the Black community.
Georgia, let's call it what it is. It is absolutely racist. That assertion is absolutely racist. You know, you started the show off by saying America is still leading most of the world in new cases. Well, last time I checked, Black folks ain't making up the overwhelming majority of the population of this country. And until you can bring out data which is showing by percentage what it is. But again, we're talking about the leadership of this country. There's no way that you're going to twist. Anybody can twist that story and now say that. Now, being to your point where you talked about the radio show host who mocked COVID and then died of it. In Dickinson County, there was a councilman by the name of Scott Apley. Did the same exact thing. Even got on YouTube, put a bunch of masks down and burned them. Shortly after, contracted COVID, died from COVID, out of Texas. It was a Texas councilman that happened to. Like I said, Saturday, you got the Governor Abbott, who is contracted. Were these people hanging around Black folks in this very much Republican state? Oh, absolutely not. So let's call this situation what it is. This is a racist statement coming from the lieutenant governor of the state of Texas. And we're talking about Dan Patrick, not the ESPN Dan Patrick, but the lieutenant governor of Texas, Dan Patrick. Absolutely a racist statement. And no matter what you do, you and Governor Abbott in the state of Texas, even when it comes to schools, look at the legislation that they just passed. When they passed their budget for the upcoming year, they stripped out all funding for virtual learning, as if to say, regardless of what the situation is, children will be back in school. And again, these are the types of decisions that you all have made over and over and over again. And is it going to desperately impact our community? Absolutely. But trust and believe, these are the types of situations that have impacted America. And that is why America is still leading the nation, the world, in the number of new COVID cases, because of decisions that have been made by folks in these Republican states who decided they wanted to be anti-mask, anti-vaccination.
And these are the times that parables are going to be written about people who mocked science and didn't survive, people who mocked common sense and they died, people who bought into conspiracy versus the fact that, folks, this is science based on hundreds of years of research. At some point, you got to be able, but there will be parables written about the people during this time. And may our lives not be such that we ignore something, or we are so committed to something that we ignore common sense and reason. But to the point of this clip, Republicans, what they do, they cannot exist without a scapegoat. You're going to find in all circumstances, in all cases, Republicans will create a scapegoat, no matter how ridiculous it is. And so long as there's somebody willing to say it on air, like Lieutenant Governor Dan, Lieutenant Dan Patrick, there we go. As long as somebody's willing to say it, then Republicans are willing to cling to it, because all they ever needed was a scapegoat to ignore their own personal responsibility to the chaos they created.
You know, and the last thing that I'll say about this, I want to remind especially parents, you know, that you do have a choice. I was having a conversation with a friend over the weekend, and she was asking me, you know, Georgia, what are you going to do with your kids? She says, because I have to go back to work and I am, you know, faced with this decision of, you know, losing my job, quitting my job so I can stay home with my kid, or putting my kid who's not old enough to get the vaccine into a daycare so that I can keep my job. She said, what are you going to do? Because we don't know what to do. You know, she said it was so easy before last year when they told us to stay at home, but now nobody's telling us to stay at home, and we have to make the choice for ourselves. And what's at stake here? I could lose my job. But on the other side of that, if I put my kid in daycare, what if he gets COVID? What are you thinking about? And so I just want to remind especially parents here. I know some kids are back in school already. There are some parents who are preparing to send their kids back to school right after Labor Day. So this is still a decision that's on many people's minds. In the same way that they say you have the choice to get the vaccine, you have a choice on whether you send your kid back to school. That's a choice. That's right. Look at the numbers. The New York Times has been doing a fantastic job of tracking these numbers every single week. Monday through Friday, you see a surge. Every Saturday and Sunday, the numbers plummet. The numbers don't lie. What is happening during the week that's not happening on the weekends?
That's right.
During the week, people are going back to work. During the week, some kids now are going back to school. On the weekends, when parents aren't forced to either send their kids or go to work, they're staying at home. And that's what's curving the virus. That's what curved the numbers last year. So I just want to remind people, the same way that these political leaders are saying you have a choice to wear the mask, you have a choice to get the vaccine, you have a choice to stay at home too.
If it was possible to pull every single black child out of this school system, I bet you we wake them the hell up at that point. Perhaps that's something we need to work on.
Yeah, but Ben, we still cannot get past the sense that what Dan Patrick said was absolutely ludicrous. It was racist, and it was absolutely wrong. So, I don't know anything else that, we need to try to decipher from that type of nonsense. But again, what Dan Patrick did, he did what America's always done. America invented the concept of race, and now in this case, America's using race to deal with their negligence.
That's right.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's unfortunate. Pivoting here before we run out of time, I do want to talk about some updates from Afghanistan. I know 20,000 people are still on the tarmac waiting to evacuate the country. There has been continuous deployments of air forces there to transport people. However, what we're seeing is the Republican Party remains divided on whether or not we should accept allies, or in their words, whether or not we should be accepting these refugees. Take a listen to what Senator Ben Sasse had to say on the issue from Nebraska.
I want to drill down on this question of Afghan refugees, because there's quite a split inside your party about bringing our Afghan allies, the people who stood up for us for those last 20 years, bringing them into this country. GOP Congressman Tom Tiffany says the Biden administration's plan to bring plane loads into the U.S. now and ask questions later is reckless and irresponsible. Ohio Republican Senate candidate J.D. Vance, author of Hillbilly Elegy, says he'd like to hear zero about Afghan refugees until we get every single American out first. Senator, there's a real difference of opinion inside your party.
First of all, a great nation is a nation that keeps its word. The American people need to understand who we're talking about here. We're talking about men and women who risked their lives to protect Americans. They fought hand in hand with our troops, and we made promises to them. There are 32 million Afghans. We're talking about 60 to 80,000 people. So the first thing to say is the American people need to understand who we're talking about. The administration has been way too slow to get people out of harm's way. They can get them to Kuwait, they can get them to Qatar, they can get them to Bahrain, they can get them to Ramstein in Germany and sort through the larger processing and bureaucratic issues there. But number three, when you fought on behalf of Americans to protect our people, you're welcome in my neighborhood.
You know, and I was surprised to see Senator Sasse take that type of a stance because it definitely goes against what the majority of his party has been saying. We've heard Republicans, even misidentify Ilhan Omar as an Afghan refugee, but lots of them using this as an opportunity to, say why we should ramp up policing back home. Lots of Republicans saying that they don't want to see this surge in refugees coming to America. But here you have one senator at least who's standing up and speaking on the facts here that these were allies, despite some of the other reports saying that there's going to be millions. He pointed to the fact that there's going to only be about 60 to 80,000 that come over if we can successfully get them evacuated from the country.
You know, Georgia, the last time we had this discussion, you would have thought that Senator Sass was listening to us on the clock, because those were my exact sentiments. America made its promise. Those allies risked family and their own lives to help protect, get information for America. So America didn't have a problem when there were with 80,000 allies helping America. But now it comes to about keeping your word, because trust and believe, should America ever get into another skirmish in another country and they need the locals for help, those locals are going to remember exactly what America did to their quote unquote allies in Afghanistan. Right. So trust and believe, it is incumbent upon America. It is the right thing to do. You made that promise. And when the Afghan allies were there for you, you now need to be there for them. So to all the Republicans who want to refer to them as refugees, trust and believe, you could never look an American veteran in the face, or anybody who wears that uniform, in protecting and defending this nation, and show respect and honor. Because just as this country gave its promise to those allies to be there, and I'll say it again, let one of the white nations who we are allies with have its issues. Trust and believe, America starts saying, yeah, I remember that promise we made to you to always be there, and America would be there. America needs to keep its word with its allies. 80,000, 180,000, 280,000. If you use 280,000, keep your word to 280,000. But in this case, 80,000, handle your business, America, because you own the clock.
I absolutely, yeah, I concur. And actually, the only thing I would offer differently, because I agree with Brother Mac 100%, and I'm surprised to the extent to which I agree with Ben Sass. Broken clock twice a day kind of thing. But the only thing to add to this is I want to challenge the narrative that Joe Biden doesn't have this under control. I see the necessary air support. I see the necessary troops. I see the necessary airport access. I see the necessary public relations moves being made by both the Biden administration and the Taliban. I see talks about recognizing the Taliban as the legitimate government there. I would offer to the conversation that Joe Biden pretty much has this. I would say he has it under control. And part of the Schadenfreude that we are experiencing is the natural course of political discourse. But every indication from actual indicators says that he has a strategy at play.
Ben, there's an absolute difference between having something under control and reacting to something. It is clear that Biden is reacting to the backlash of the soup sandwich that he made in exiting Afghanistan. It ain't control he's doing. He's reacting right now.
I would offer that it's the exact opposite, because of the nature of the target that he is focused on. Joe Biden is focused on a singular target, and that is this may upset some people, but it is the recognition of the Taliban as a legitimate government in Afghanistan. That is his only target. And so he is doing what's necessary in terms of getting all the allies out. Right. We see all the assets on the ground. And because of the orderly fashion of how he has delivered these main agenda points, I don't think that it's all reactionary. I would say that there is strategy here.
Ben, absolutely. Listen, Ben, go ahead, Georgia.
Well, and I was just going to pose the question, what is the alternative? You know, if we've been in this country for 20 years, what is the alternative? What would have been a better strategy? Because you look at the fact of occupying this country for 20 years, spending trillions of dollars on this war, and pulling out and ending up in this situation. I don't know if there was a different way to exit that would have resulted in anything different other than us continuing to stay there. And so when you look at us staying there and really not making the progress that we hope to after 20 years, the strategy of pulling out and bringing people to our country where we can ensure that they're safer, I know it feels like the lesser of two evils, but I mean, after being there 20 years, what else were we supposed to do?
Okay, fair enough, Georgia. So here's the strategy. You've been there for 20 years. Clearly, after 20 years, you have a very good indication of who your allies are and how many of their family members. So you have an idea of the number of allies. So at the point that you decided under this administration that we're going to exit Afghanistan, first and foremost, I don't know why you needed to broadcast it to the world at that point. But now that you know that that's what you're going to do, all you had to do at that point was begin to pull together all of your allies, pull them together in an orderly fashion, and have a situation where you're now saying to them, look, on this certain day, we're going to, we're going to start moving out of Afghanistan. So they could have had an orderly fashion about moving allies out without making these broad announcements. Because keep in mind, at that point, the Taliban didn't have checkpoints all over the place. They hadn't taken over the country. The president was still there. The so-called Afghan military was still there. So you could have done this in a much orderly fashion and a timely fashion and got your allies out, because trust and believe, the Taliban wasn't about to start firing while American troops and everything was still in place. So you could have gotten your allies out. And in the process of making that plan, you could have had plans set up so that you can easily identify who are members of the allies and who are not. You could have had it set up with different countries in a timely fashion as to where these allies are going to go, if not come to America. But you could have done all of those things. But when the first thing you do is pull the troops out, of course, now here comes the reaction. Well, we didn't expect the Taliban to take over as quickly as they did. Well, when you did what you did, of course the Taliban is going to take over. So could there have been an absolutely better strategy with all the military forces there? You could have very easily started.
Is there a possibility that we don't have all the information as civilians? I mean, when you think about military operations, I feel like a lot of times there's intel that we are not privy to. It blows my mind that in just 10, 11 days, all the order that the U.S. tried to establish in this country just fell to shambles. I am leaning more towards the side that there was some intel that the U.S. military had that prompted its decision to retreat that we're not privy to. And I'm going to stand on that because there's a part of this equation that still doesn't quite make sense to me.
Okay, so Georgia, listen, let's assume that we pulled all of our allies out. We pulled all of the Americans out. And then the country in a matter of 15 days falls apart. Okay, fine. I can absolutely accept that. If the Afghan army didn't have a commitment there, the president didn't have a commitment there, I can absolutely understand it falling apart in that time. But at this point, the way that it fell apart and you leaving your allies at risk, because look at what the Taliban is doing. Even now, the Taliban is going door to door looking for anybody, any family members or any of these allies who assisted through interpretation or otherwise given information to America. So there is no doubt that the way that this fell apart was because he did not have a plan or whatever. Maybe Biden was given, because it's hard for me to believe that the military genius and them understanding how we exit out and understanding the importance, because I think that if you ask any military person, they're going to tell you the importance of standing by your allies. And then keep in mind when Obama became president and he chose Biden as his vice presidential candidate, everybody thought that was a good move because Biden supposedly has such good international understanding. So it is beyond me that Biden could not understand the importance of protecting the allies and to understand what would happen if America's protection, if the troops left first, what would happen to the allies? What would happen to the Afghan army? It's hard for me to believe that he didn't understand that. Clearly, this is a situation that not that Biden had control, Brother Dixon. Biden is reacting to a soup sandwich that he made.
I know we're out of time, but I beg that we interrogate a particular question. Whose narrative are we adopting that is free from the incentive to remain in Afghanistan?
No, Ben, I'm not talking about remaining.
I said no. Again, the narrative that we're arguing is what I'm talking about. I don't attribute that to you at all. I attribute wanting to remain to CNN. I attribute wanting to remain to MSNBC. I attribute wanting to remain to the mainstream media, who has a vested interest in remaining, because it literally in between their commercial breaks their commercial breaks are defense contractors. CNN has a vested interest. And so we have to ask ourselves the question, like, which narrative is actually true? Because as we discuss the troops no longer being there and troops being pulled out, we are simultaneously discussing the fact that the troops are there to assist getting the allies out. So I'm really curious which narrative is actually true. And I suggest that it is not the narrative that is being forwarded by the mainstream media, who are actually the ones who are saying that this is a soup sandwich. And all those things that you're arguing, Brother Mac, they're coming from mainstream media who has a vested interest in remaining. Because every indication, but let me finish the point. Every single indication that we've discussed at this point, here and to this point, suggests actual strategy. It doesn't suggest that it's a cut and run. Even the surrender of the weapons is a form of strategy. This is part and parcel of a strategy. And I will capstone it with this and yield the floor to you, Brother Mac. Because he does have access to the greatest military minds. He does have access to all the intelligence that we do not have. He does have the full set of information. And I will give you, he was right when President Obama was wrong. Joe Biden was right in opposing the surge when President Obama strategized the surge and sent it in. He was right. So Joe Biden does have some international foreign policy prowess, and I see more strategy here than a soup sandwich. And I suggest that the narrative of a soup sandwich is coming from mainstream media, who has a vested interest in remaining in Afghanistan, financial interest.
Look, it's some simple things. You dance with who brought you. And those Afghan allies who were there, they helped bring us information. Now, we need to honor that. Now, if this is something that is so unconscionable for us to understand, usually stupid is. Stupid is hard to understand. And I'm just simply looking at my own eyes of saying that if a person was there with me, it's like if we as brothers, we go to a club. If something breaks out, if I see you in a scramble, I'm not coming over there to ask you, look, Ben, what's happening? That's right. We're handling that business, and we'll deal with the other part of it on the outside of it. But right then and there, we are handling that business. In this situation, Biden left the club. He left you and I in there to get a beat down. And we were the ones that was there with the dude. So I'm simply saying, to be able to take care of your allies and get them safely out of the country, if you want out of Afghanistan after 20 years, fine. Do it the right way. I offered no argument about whether or not we should leave Afghanistan. Absolutely, we should. But for those men and women, those allies who was there with us, as the senator said, who was there for us, there's an obligation that we have to them. And we absolutely failed on that. And we failed because there was an absolutely miserable execution of a plan. And now what we're seeing is President Biden, who we all voted for. At least I know I did. I'm seeing him react. I'm seeing him react to the situation more so than having it under control from day one.
But how could the troops simultaneously have abandoned the allies, and they are literally the conduits that are carrying them out? The troops are bringing them out.
Okay, so troops.
Well, I think, Brother Mac, you're basically saying that they should have corralled the allies before even announcing that they were going to exit. And I don't argue that that's a better plan, but the point I was making is, do we, as the public, have all of the information, all of the intel on whether or not that was even a possibility? And so sometimes we're coming into these conversations, even the media is not privy to the highest classified information from the military. So we're coming to this conversation and we know we don't have all of the facts. So what was it that prompted it, and why wouldn't we be able to corral all of our allies before actually exiting? And to Ben's point, no, they haven't been abandoned yet. They're still U.S. military forces in Afghanistan. And we've heard Biden continue to renew his commitment to saying that, yes, first of all, we're getting all the Americans out who want to leave. And then our second priority is to try to get all of the 60 to 80,000 allies out. To wrap this up, because we are over time, Utah, Iowa, Minnesota are among the states who have agreed to accept refugees. I anticipate that we'll see more people sign on to that list. But right now, those are the top three. And we are out of time. So I'm going to encourage you guys to stick around because I know Ben is going to expound on this conversation later on. But that's all we have today for On the Clock. Thank you so much for watching.